Hi, I'm Sam Benowitz, the founder of Raintree Nursery, and I'm here with my good friend Bruce Weiskotten. Bruce, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Bruce Weiskotten, and I've known Sam for a long time. We worked together. We had a great business-to-business relationship, and my business was Pan Earth Designs, and Sam, of course, was Raintree Nursery, and he founded it. So I met Sam when I was going to Evergreen, studying ecological agriculture, and I wanted to do a internship at Raintree, but the funding fell out. So that's how I first met Sam. And then later I started my own permaculture design business. And Sam was a great business partner and friend. And we shared a lot around edible landscaping, fruticulture, sustainable living. And of course, Raintree Nursery had the plants that I needed to design edible landscapes and sustainable landscapes for my clients. So, Sam, I just want to say, you've had an impact that's really broad with the fruticulture for the Northwest. We were trying to reach people with how to live sustainably, produce their own food with edible landscaping, and you were the provider of all these cultivars that you had researched for the Pacific Northwest. We just have a different climate, this chill Northwest climate, and people had trouble growing fruit and producing because they were using varieties from Stark Brothers and other companies across the country that just weren't adapted. And your work really pioneered a lot. And it was great. The timing I came in with my little business, Sam already had the goods, and I could come in and introduce people to what would work for them. And it was just a great combination, a great symbiotic relationship, A lot of people don't realize how broad-reaching your impact was, because it was really just a natural thing. You were easy with the way you presented your business, and you'd always come up to Seattle and reach out to people, and you built that loyal customer base. And I worked for Raintree off and on as a horticultural expert. And so I was talking to people on the phone from all over the country who started out in the Northwest with Raintree Nursery. And they knew there was a quality there and a customer relationship, a personal relationship.
So working with you, Bruce, was really important for me too, because what we did is we realized that just supplying people with trees is not going to make for a successful experience.
Yeah.
That what you really need to do, you need the right varieties, and you need but you also need somebody who's an expert who can go to your place a lot of times and help you set up your landscape, and then maybe even come back and help you learn how to take care of it, because so many people plant trees and the trees just don't thrive. So it's really important that as we work together, we're providing a successful experience for people where they can get the right tree and take care of it and have somebody that can answer their questions and come to their place and help them. So we worked with you and with other edible landscapers and permaculture landscapers throughout the Northwest. And it kind of made a network so that almost wherever you were in Western Washington and some amount in Western Oregon, you could get somebody who was very knowledgeable to come to your place and help you install the landscape. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Did most people want you to just do all the work and then just come back and take care of it every few weeks? Or did you have a lot of people that wanted to learn how to be successful and how to eventually do it on their own?
Yeah, well, Sam, that was what was really beautiful about that, business to business client relationship was that, and it was really led by you. You had even seen that. I kind of came into it trying to start up my business, and it was nice to walk into. Raintree had the call line, and I was the landscape expert, so I'd go out and work with people. And I worked with a whole range of people. Some people wanted me to do everything from design to build, install, and maintenance. Some people just wanted a plan and recommendations. So, because my emphasis was on design, a lot of people I just did designs for, and others I did the full-on design, build, follow-up, and some people were just maintenance. But almost every one of my clients had some interest in what Raintree had to offer. And I did advertising through the catalog too, so it helped me. It was a real mutual benefit relationship, and it created this good symbiosis.
Bruce, tell us a little bit about what's important to you about sustainable agriculture and how it's became a part of your life.
Well, that's a good question, Sam. I guess really, when I was young, I had a really great science teacher, and he was explaining us about pollution, all this, and I was realizing how bad things were. And then he turned to us and he said, and it's up to your generation to turn this around, or something like that. The whole point was I was getting angry at people who had been polluting, and then he was like, well, you guys are going to have to solve this. And I was like, what? So I think that was an awakening moment. It wasn't really until many years later, when I was bouncing around in college and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, that I went to alternative communities and learned about this idea of permaculture, which is sustainable agriculture. It's about the culture of sustainability. If we don't have a culture of sustainability, we're going to have a police state. We're going to have an eco-police state. Because when you see the details about degradation and what's going down with the destruction of the environment, I could talk for 2 weeks about everything that's going wrong. But permaculture is talking about what we can do right. There's so many options. There's just so many things we can do that are about the culture of living well. And, it comes down to care of people, care of the earth, care of all living things. I know that sounds like tremendously la-di-da, but when you break it down into actual actions, it really works. And there's much more to permaculture, but it's about sustainable living, and it's how people have lived for millennium. Before we had plows, people were doing permaculture, basically. It's a word that is invented to talk about sustainable agriculture and a culture that is based on sustainable production. Which, the thing about culture as a word, you can't separate it from growing. Like, culture and agriculture are inextricably combined, and you can break it down to almost any culture, like as a ethnic culture, you can break it down to how they grow things. But I mostly felt it empowering that you could realize there's so many solutions, and I wanted to be a part of helping people find those solutions. And the first place I started was with just simple organic, simple edible landscaping. It didn't even have to be organic to be sustainable. Organic would say it's changing the bag, but helping people produce things for themselves. and modern society, you have this insecurity. How do we produce food? How do we produce clothing and shelter and basic necessities? We don't know, and that makes us really insecure. But as we build skills, capabilities, and know how to produce our food, produce anything, medicine, raw materials, it's like empowering. And there are so many solutions for energy, for everything. I could talk about it for days. But that's what got me into it, and I created my business around design services for people, helping people kind of create their own little paradise. And that to me meant being able to, offer themselves good, healthy food, even if, of course, everybody buys food from the grocery. But if you get even some of your own food that you grow, it makes a huge difference, health-wise and psychologically, in so many ways. And that's where I started.
Yeah, Bruce, tell us about this amazing apple that you were able to introduce into the United States.
Well, it was a real adventure, because I found this article about the Bardsey Island Apple, and this guy, Ian Sturrock in Wales, who went on a trip to an island, and he was a fruticulturist. He had his own nursery, but he happened to see an apple growing at this unusual island called Bardsey Island. It's an island that was mythical in Wales. I mean, it's associated with bards. It's got an association with King Arthur and Merlin and all this. And he happened to find this apple, took a cutting of it and brought it back to his nursery, because he's a nurseryman. He started propagating it, and he grew it out, came up with an apple that was uniquely suited for Wales, which is a chill, humid climate that's similar to our climate. And he was wondering, what the heck is this apple? And he's an expert on Welsh apples, knows most apples in the UK. He sent it off to the horticultural center in England to ask them, what apple is this? And they got back to him and said, it's the Bardsey Island apple. It's totally unique. It's not like anything in our collection. And you, better than anyone, Sam, know the horticulture center in England has a vast collection of apples from all over Europe, of course, and everything in the UK. So I heard about it. I was like, wow. And we had been talking about the fact that with cloning apples, you've kind of got this suspended time where the apples that we're eating are really clones of apples that people were eating when the country was founded. There's this diminishing gene pool for apple propagation, because all the apples, it's just inbreeding. It's just the same problem with breeding animals. So I actually came to you and said, hey, did you know about this apple? And fortunately, you, of course, happen to have a permit for importing mollusk species, apple species from the UK. So that's where it all started. And we went through that process. And it's one of the things I've done in my life that actually has contributed something, I think, to posterity, in the sense that bringing that apple to the United States for commercial propagation, making it available, changes the gene pool. And that's always kind of been something that Raintree's been into, is expanding the options and enriching our potentials for growing. And always aimed at the Northwest, but that's an important work to do.
Well, that's the variety is interesting. So Bardsey is like a red apple, and it ripens. I think it's late September or something like that.
Well, it's red, but it can be a lighter skin. So I mean, I think you might want to consider doing some fruit pruning to get that color out of it. I actually brought it in, and you cultivated it. I have not had much chance to actually grow it out.
Right. Well,
you probably know more about it than I.
Yeah, we have trees growing at Raintree, and they've been growing there for many years now.
Yeah.
And they do well, and they're completely scab resistant, and and they have really good flavor. So it's a wonderful apple for our area.
Yeah.
But one interesting thing is when we asked for some pictures of where it was growing, and it was growing in this stone courtyard of this house, but the stones were up high enough so that they blocked the wind on all four sides, but the sun was able to come in from the south, and it was on the south facing thing of the stone, so it was really a unique microclimate that they grew in that. And then I started to think, well, of course you could, it would do well there in that one particular thing, completely out of the wind, and in a south facing, up against a rock wall. However, it turned out that it did fine growing out in the orchard here in Western Washington.
Well, that's what we had hoped for.
Yeah.
And it's got a pretty amazing history. Apparently, there was a monastery on that island where they cultivated apples. So nobody knows really where it came from, because apples were being imported to Bardsey Island by the monks to grow, and possibly the only reason it survived without any care, because the monastery had been abandoned. So what you just explained about the microclimate, perfect place for it to grow, might explain how it survived when most of their orchard didn't.
So Bruce, what would you tell a person that's just interested in getting started? They haven't really been involved with growing things very much, or with sustainable solutions, but they're interested and they see the problems in the world. How do you think that they should think about it, or how should they get started in being part of the solution that you were talking about?
Well, that's a good question. And there's so many problems, and it's great to be solving the problems of the world. But I think one of the most important things is do it for yourself. Do something for yourself. Take care of yourself. So whatever it is that's your inspiration, growing food, producing your own energy, maybe it's medicinal herbs, all of that's great, but start with what's meaningful for you. And yes, if you can make it lucrative, of course, cash cropping, anything that you can sell that's easy for you to get into promoting and selling is always good. But don't get caught up in some dream that you're going to save the world, because a lot of people just get burnt out with doing the right thing to solve the problems for everyone. It'll take you down. And I've seen it many times. I've been through it myself. You want to do what's going to sustain you and your family and the people you care about and the community you're a part of. And that is going to be a really great strategy. There's so many easy places to start in. Think of your favorite foods. What would you devote time to caring for the plant that's going to produce this? It's got to have a payout. I mean, if you like chocolate, it's going to be kind of hard in the Northwest. You can't grow the chocolate tree, the cocoa tree, but you can grow something else. There's got to be something that you love that you'll just be willing to put the care into it, and it won't be a burden. And I always started with my clients with a questionnaire that was, what food do they eat? What medicinals do they spend money on? What What are your outgoing? Because with permaculture, we try and produce our own stuff. So what are you spending money on that you can produce with what you've got? So look at your resource base, and it might only be a little apartment. It might even be just little container gardens. I know a couple of people in Italy who were growing saffron, and they had this tiny little patch where they grow, saffron's crocuses, and they would go
Which
out.
are beautiful.
They are beautiful,
Yeah.
and they smell wonderful.
Yeah.
But the autumn crocus is the saffron producer. They'd go with these little brushes and collect saffron pollen. Their crop would fit in a tiny little bag, It's micro, but they actually made money at it, and they were passionate enough about it to actually get out there and harvest, because most people won't do that. So any farmer will tell you there's work that goes into it. So it's got to be something that you're passionate about, and it's got to produce for you too. And beauty, of course, is always important. I always had to try and get to know my clients' sense of what's beautiful to them.
Some edible plants, a lot of them are some of the most beautiful trees and plants. And so the idea that there's edible plants and ornamental plants is not really the case. There's lots of edible plants that are very ornamental. And one thing that I would add to what you say is that you might think that if you just start small and grow a few of something that you're interested in, well, that you're not doing very much and that you're kind of all by yourself. But you're not by yourself. And what you're doing is important, because with the internet and just different organizations that are in touch with each other, every organization, if you're interested in cider or probably saffron growing or mushrooms or medicinal plants, once you get interested in that, you find other like-minded people, not just in your area, but all over the country, and you start talking to them, and you find out that you're part of an important movement, and that we went to these permaculture conferences where people who are interested at all different levels come together and spend a few days just exchanging ideas and learning how to work together. So it's important to, when you start becoming part of this solution, you may think you're doing it on your own, but it's pretty easy to connect to other people and realize that you're part of an important web that is making a big difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And that, I would just say 10 times much. That's back to that cultural aspect. And living in Italy was profound, because food is so integral to culture in Italy.
Yeah.
And everyone was interested in talking about it. And you might think, some people might think that's old-fashioned or boring or farmer talk, but it really isn't. There's so many things about the growing experience that are about culture, and culture is based on that. Even fashion is based on that.
Mm-hmm.
There's an expression in Italian fashion, it's called moda, and a moda is an expression in Italian. Kind of a moda is do it the right way. It's a modino is do it properly, but it all goes back linguistically. The origin for a moda was how you tilled a field. I mean, literally,
Right.
like in ancient times when farming started in Italy, a moda was how you tilled the field. Just an example, but so many things that, if you're having an experience, it's shareable, and people who are doing the same thing want to know about it, and it's, you'll have experience you can offer to other people, and they'll have something to share for you. It's a part of that community aspect that's really great, and if you're doing it for yourself, who cares? That's why doing something for yourself is really important. It empowers you to empower other people. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to help anybody else. And what you do that brings you passion. I used to ask my customers, you come home to your garden, what do you see that inspires you?
Yeah, and it's interesting that we live in America, which is different than most other countries on the planet. We're made up mostly of immigrants that came from all over the world. And in fact, Raintree customers disproportionately have been either first generation or second generation immigrants, because in general, they were closer to their gardening and farming backgrounds. And maybe and when they came over to this country, they brought those interests and wanting those plants with them. And that's part of the reason Raintree was excited about going all over the world to find plants that would grow in our area. But in the Pacific Northwest, we've got people from hundreds of different cultures, from European cultures, Asian cultures, Latin American cultures, all over the world. And we can even tell when they call up what kind of plants they're going to want by their accent. And they're always amazed that we already know what they're going to want before they ask for it. But the idea that we have all those cultures that were immigrants and have all these ideas and food culture that we've brought from other places is something that is being reimagined and being, the restaurants are promoting that, and it's becoming a big deal again. And it's something that all of us can become part of. We can bring whatever our culture that we thought, was in our past, could actually be part of what our grandparents, what did they give us, as far as foods that we can bring to the conversation and bring to our lives. So the idea of incorporating the cultures of who we are as hyphenated Americans, to bring that literally to the table is really a gift that we can give ourselves, our family, and each other. Well, Bruce, thank you very much for this evening, and it was very interesting, and we really enjoyed hearing what you had to say.
Well, thank you, Sam, because it's been a really great exchange we've had. It's good to see you again, and remember the good times we've had together.
Yeah.
And all the work we've done. It's been a joy and meaningful. And we should thank all the Raintree customers out there who've made it all worthwhile. I mean, it's without the customers, none of this would happen. So it's been great working with the clients I've had. I've always been amazed at how my best clients were almost always connected with Raintree some way or another. They'd connect with me, I'd connect with them, and it was enjoyable. People who were a quality and looking for quality.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thank all of you for being part of this interesting experiment in growing fruit. Thank you.